I actually remember this moment. It was around about the year 2000 and 2001, and I was offered to go and run a dealership. I was sort of hesitating, and the state general manager, he said to me, James, sometimes you have to repot yourself. Like, you're a tree in a pot plant and you'll only grow as big as the pot. And boy, whatever pain or challenge I thought it was going to be, which I thought was going to be really, really hard, it was way harder. This 4.5 years later, the guy's trying to kill me with a steak knife. It got wild. James Schramko here. Welcome back to my show. This is episode 1099. Today we're chatting with Lloyd Thompson from VirtualDOO.com. How you going, Lloyd?
Very well, James. Thanks for having me.
So, quick question off the top. Should we sell our business or just keep running it?
I want to keep mine going, but that's great because that's what we're going to talk about today. I put out a newsletter the other week and it was on that very topic, and I got some emotional responses. And I thought, okay, this is something I'll need to talk about with James. So that was where the idea came from.
Yeah, I've been listening to podcasts like John Murillo, and a recurring theme that I hear when people sell their business is if they have tied their identity to it, or they're too heavily involved in it, or it is them. When they sell it, they feel a sense of loss and remorse and a lot of emotion. And I've had plenty of clients go through that. In the last year, I've had two software clients sell. One sold for over $500 million. Another one sold for tens of millions of dollars. And I've had some really interesting discussions with them about why they sold. I helped them through the sales process in some cases, and then reflection of after they sell. And in fact, after you sell, there's a whole other issues present too, like everyone comes out of the woodwork wanting them to invest or wants a loan, or then there's security threats and issues and family estate planning and like what to do with all the money and how to minimize it. It's not like you sell and then all your problems go away. In some cases, you change the type of problem you have. So that's on a macro level. But then I think a lot of people are motivated to sell because they're not enjoying the business they have, but perhaps they could have if they'd gone down a different path. And I think that's worth talking about too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from what I've seen, I think some people, they are in real pain, and selling, it's like a very emotional thing. They're like getting a divorce. They are over it. They've ridden that train, those ups and downs as an entrepreneur, and they just want to get out ASAP, get their cash and be gone. And then there's these other folks who are like the empty nesters. They're teenagers of now leaving the nest, and they've nurtured that business since its beginning. They instilled their culture, they grew their team, and now it's like, well, they want to cash in, they want to let go, but it's a very emotional thing. And so I thought it would be worth talking about that, because maybe it doesn't have to be such an emotional departure, whether you've really disliked running it or whether you loved it and now you're letting your legacy go. Because I want to be able to compare what it's like to either sell your business or have someone run it for you. And so that was my motivation today. And I've got 4 areas up my sleeve.
Cool. Well, for context, from my perspective, I've started, built and sold businesses. I've purchased businesses, kept businesses, sold businesses. So I'm happy to build brands and sell them. Done it plenty of times. Certainly as a mentor, I've experienced it through my clients many, many times, like dozens of times. And some of the people I coach and mentor are people who are specialists in buying, growing, building, roll-ups, all this stuff. So I've read as many books as I can find on this subject. So I'm really interested in it. If people know me for performance deals as well, where I get to partner with people and sometimes they sell and pay out, which has happened multiple times now as well. That's my experience. From your side, you're an operations expert. You're providing these fractional operations services to often medium-sized companies, sometimes small companies, sometimes larger companies, but often they're bringing in you to tune up and clean up the business with a view to selling it, but you're doing essentially revenue operations where you're getting things running more smoothly with the people and the systems so the company's more profitable, more stable and more attractive to a buyer. The flip side is, of course, they might turn around and then say, well, actually all the things that I hated about the business have gone. why don't we just continue with this? So this is really interesting. You've got perspective on it. I've got perspective on it. And I also want to discuss the idea of legacy. That one really interests me as well, because it's often wheeled out as an excuse to do things. And I wonder, after you pass, does legacy even matter? Or is it just ego in the present?
Yeah, I think people are really tied to that. Well, let's start with the easy place first, which is the financial reason for selling. I think most people sell, they want their money right now. And I think people have got to know that, and we've talked about this when we've talked about John Warrillow, sorry. If you are still in the day-to-day operations, then you might not just be able to immediately pull the ripcord and get out of there, because you might be asked by the company that you're selling to do an earn-out, which is where you're going to stay in that business for a period of time to hand over, because the new buyer is not looking for a job. So you can't necessarily just, that's it, I've sold, I'm out of here. It might be, an earn-out can be as much as 3 years. So it can make sense to, in that case, install an operator so that you can give yourself a smooth out of the business.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. There's like a sliding scale, right? In a franchise situation, then the people literally do end up with a job. They're paying for a business to have a job. So that's the extreme. If the business were able to run without you, that's the ultimate. Someone might just pay you some money and you don't have to work another day. That happened to one of the clients that sold this year for me. He got paid up front in full, and he wasn't required after the purchase because he'd built a team around him, partly through my guidance, that operated the business to the point where, and this is the dream, and I've experienced this in real life, where if the owner of the business were to come into the business, then the newest people in the business wouldn't even know who it was. And so
that's great. That's what you want.
That's like a dream handover. And I remember when someone explained to me why you sell a business, it just made so much sense. They said, well, you'll basically get paid 3, 5, 7, 10 years worth of profit and then not have to go to the work anymore, and you can start on the next thing. And I'm like, well, if you did that several times, you'd actually accelerate decades worth of profit. And so that's why I like to build to sell. Done it multiple times, doing it again. The surf brand, I will sell that surf brand one day, and it will get a multiple of income. And I'm being careful not to make it dependent on me too much. I don't mention my name. I'm not using my own audience for it. And I think someone could come and take over that brand, especially the website component. And these are considerations. But it's very, very common when someone acquires a business that they're not going to pay it all up front. They're going to pay a portion of it, and then they're going to pay over time. And it's pretty common that it is either performance-based or not performance-based. So 2 of the businesses I sold, one of them was performance-based. We took 1 year later was a second part of the payment, and it was based on where the business is at in terms of the performance of when I sold it, which was giving me a vested interest to keep referring people to it. I wasn't required to spend a day on it, but I was required to make sure it survived. Mm-hmm. The other one was just paid in installments, and that was not dependent on performance. And there can still be hiccups there. If the business doesn't go well, they might not be in a position to pay you installments. I mean, there'll be a number of reasons why I would suggest to anyone who's selling a business, whatever that amount you sell it for should be considered as the entire amount, and anything beyond that is probably a bonus. And there'll be a lot of mental head focus on, if you have to go into your business that you used to own now as an employee, it will change the dynamic. And we hear a lot about that from the John Warrillow podcasts, where the founders, they just get so upset because this is no longer their business. But you don't have to go down that path. One way would be to get it running so well without you that you want to keep it. It's now you've moved from the operator to the investor, and you can go and start your next thing now because you're not really needed in the first thing. And that's a really interesting situation.
Well, you spoke to an interesting point there when you were talking about how the payment is made, because you wouldn't want any conditional payment if you're offloading that business because you think there's a risk coming. For example, I mean, we're seeing so much change in AI at the moment. And if your business is going to be heavily impacted by AI and you're not ready to make the changes, for example, I was thinking about one the other day, which was the traditional call center. I took a flight to Melbourne last week and I had a 110 watt power bank that would fuel my laptop while I was going away. I thought, I know there's some kind of limit about what kind of power bank I can take on the flight, but how am I going to get through to customer service? It's going to take forever. I just asked ChatGPT. I just asked ChatGPT about the airline and what their policy was. It saved me a lot of time. So that made me think, if you're a traditional call center right now and you're not changing to evolve into the space of how AI is going to affect your call center, then you could be at risk. So I'm using that as an example where if you were in a business where you're going to have some kind of conditional payout and performance in a declining industry, then that might not be such a good bet.
Yeah, and so a lot of this is going to depend on who's buying it and why they're buying it. And there'll be some businesses that are just in a general decline and at risk. And so you might have already missed your window, potentially. If you did have a call center and you wanted to get someone to come in and run it, at least you could be working on the next thing while it's ticking over. And the next thing might be some form of iteration of the next generation. Like, for example, I'm thinking about Uber, where they're most likely having a look at driverless cars,
self-driving cars. Yeah.
There will be transitions to every industry, but let's say you're on the fence. You don't know if you're going to sell or not. Like, you don't have a strong enough reason. The main reason that you want to sell is because you just hate the business. You're no longer interested and it just drains you. What would you say to that person?
It's like, if that person is going to have the time to hand over to someone in the business, like if they're going to have the emotional energy to bring in someone who's going to run their business, great. But they're going to have to be really honest with themselves and say, am I going to be willing to do this? Because it's going to take a bit of time. But if they're like, rip the cord, I need to get out of here, then maybe they sell. If it's someone who's like, I do want to get a good price for this business, or perhaps I do want to be involved with this business, then perhaps being able to get out of that business and have someone else run it for you and still be an interested stakeholder or an investor might be a good option. And that's something I'm starting to see a bit more of. Very recently, actually, I had someone who came to me. He owns a number of businesses, and he said, hey, I think there's some opportunities for improvement in these businesses that I've got here. Can you run, I hear you do audits. Can you run some audits across these business and look for opportunities for improvement? And so that's where he's been able to not be involved in the day-to-day and purely be an investor and really just enjoy the fruits of his business and really truly be above it. I think that's the ultimate goal for someone, is to just be an interested stakeholder, be able to make the changes they want, look at the opportunities, but not have to dive in and do all of the work and still grow their business.
Yeah, I think that's the investor role, and it's a great role to have. And they still say one of the most serious ways you can build wealth is to own a business, but a lot of owners become owner operators and they're tied to it. I can hear that.
you can hear the fire engine go past to it.
But you know what I like about that it's real and it's happening and it's like real life. Have you ever been to San Francisco? There's not a time when there isn't a siren.
Yeah, right.
It's always something peculiar about that place. So I think I know that client, and yeah, it is a situation where you may not realize the value of what you're sitting on because you're so close to it and you've exhausted a few regular avenues, but not everyone's brought in a third party to come and do a full audit or diagnostic to look for opportunities. So obviously the very first step I do when I'm mentoring someone, it's like you show me your stuff and I'll tell you what I see and all the potential things. But in your case, what I love the most is that because you've been working with all different clients before, you already know the playbook for what has to happen. It's very obvious to you. Oh my goodness, like, no, these people shouldn't be doing that role and nobody's responsible for this thing. And you have 3 software tools that aren't talking to each other. I think you can probably get by with one. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, maybe they can fall back in love with the business that they're not in love with.
We're really enjoying that work at the moment without being specific about what it is, because, there's a couple of companies there We've got operators working on each. We can see where the opportunities are emerging. Our operators internally are talking to each other about, this is what I'm seeing over here. You seeing this over here? These are some great, synergies that exist inside of these businesses. And then we've got our internal COO bringing it all together. And I can see so many areas of improvement and value to be added. So it's good for us to be able to see the amount of value we can add. I really want to talk about being in control, because I feel like the amount of control that you want to be involved is a nice lead on from being an investor. Like, how much control do you want? And I think selling is an area, well, the obvious thing is if you're selling and you've got pays, then you're no longer going to have control, and perhaps that's a good thing. But if you're doing an earn out where you're still going to remain in the business, you're not the visionary anymore. Now you have a job. So your idea of you had this thing, you cared for it, you took it to where it got to so far, maybe you're not going to enjoy that earn out as much as you did when you were running that business. So that's just something I think to be aware of if you're selling your business.
Reminds me of that protein bar guy, and he sold it, and then it's like he's in it, but it was his thing and now it's not his thing, and that's really hard to take. You see them everywhere, but it's not yours anymore. It'd be devastating.
I had a funny one like that the other day. A friend of mine has just sold his hotel, and he's actually a systems guy. So we nerd out on systems talk. And so his business was very systemized, lots of automations, even to the extent that the front desk had a window into a team member in the Philippines. And when I think of a hotel, I think this is going to be a lot of work. But for the amount he's systemized it, he's managed to get so much automated and so much work remoted offshore. And he sold it to the new owner. He got the price he was looking for. He's very happy about that. But the shock he's in now, because they've got rid of the offshore team and they've got rid of the automations, it's like you're killing the profit. I mean, he's got paid, so it doesn't matter as much anymore, but he's just seeing this thing that he's invested for so long in. He has no control. He doesn't know what's going to happen to that team anymore. These automations that he spent years investing in just gone, it's like, oh my word, imagine seeing that.
That's, like when I left my general manager's role, I just slowly watched some of the things that were in place just slowly erode and deteriorate in, the years that passed. Some of the same people were still there, but some of the systems and best practices faded away. And then now as a consumer, when I'm purchasing vehicles, I'm experiencing the total normality of everything reverting back to where it used to be, and it's sad. But I took the ideas and systems that work for me and harnessed them in different mediums. And same with that protein bar guy. He went off to be very successful in the next ventures. Sometimes you just got to face that it's not going to be that way. In fact, one of the businesses I sold, they repurposed who their target client was and stopped offering white labeling to the vast majority of the army of white label people I'd built up over years, and changed the direction of the business. Ultimately, I think for the success of the business, and it needed to do that because it was an obvious move and the reason why it was acquired. But it was, it's the end of an era. And as I get older, each decade older, I'm realizing eras close and you go from one season to another. We're entering the new season, the AI era season, and a lot of seasons will shut down because of that.
Definitely an area where you want to be keeping on top of what's happening.
If you're not doing R&D, you're dead. If you're not doing R&D in business, and it's applied pre-internet, post-internet, pre-AI, post-AI, you have to do R&D. It happens in the Michelin star restaurants. It happens in the car industry. I mean, of course, they're working on the next model to replace the one that you see on the street now, or else that's it. That's the end of the game. What most people fail to do is some kind of research and development, and that's why they're not innovating, and then they get smoked out.
People say to me, is AI going to take my job? And I say, I'm not sure, but I can tell you that if you don't have AI skills, then probably if you don't have AI skills, then where are you? And this is like not being able to use Google. Imagine if you were using a computer and you didn't know how to use a search engine. Now this is what it's like.
I mean, I've just had some people painting the ceiling in my house and that's not going to be replaced by AI, but it's also quite unleveraged. So I'd say the less leveraged or the less digital a job is, the more safe it will be. Still going to need painters, still going to need lawn mowers, although there are quite a few robots out there for mowing lawns. But that being the case, when you bring in an operator who is fractional operations like you, or a mentor like me, you're bringing in the hybrid vigor of all the benchmarks and exposure to other industries and clients that you can benefit from instantly. You don't have to wait years to figure it out. You can access it immediately. So in your case, you've been that someone that people bring in. I was explaining this to somebody yesterday. One thing that you do that is genius is when the owner says, okay, Lloyd, listen, we're thinking we want to bring in our own operations manager. Like, isn't bringing you in going to be exactly the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing here? And you say, no, it's what you should do. We will come in and we'll audit your systems and people. We'll tell you exactly what we see. We'll show you the pathway to fixing it. We'll meet with your team and run them for you with a weekly cadence or whatever is required at the size business they are. And then we'll help you review the applications for the operations manager role, and we'll tell you which one we think is the best fit for the team and systems you've got. And when they come on, we'll do an overlap to hand it over, maybe a month or so, and then you're all good. And they're like,
we make ourselves redundant.
Yeah. I mean,
we make, and we're fine with that. I mean, it's just, and that's our model. If we've done our job well,
it's actually doing the right thing for the customer and not trying to create a black box or hide everything from them or make them need you, which is the old school way.
Yeah. I mean, we look for every opportunity to hand over, upskill, and if it means that they're going to look to bring in a full-timer or someone in the team is growing that or sees what we're doing and they want to do it and they have the capability to do it, then we will absolutely upskill and give the best possible handover. I will say this, just rounding out on the topic of control, is we've talked about the investor and you just mentioned about a weekly cadence. That's definitely something that makes a difference. So if you're going to bring in someone and have them run your operation, then the people who manage to do this well, they're both able to let go of the reins so that someone else can run, but they need to be involved enough to be able to steer. So if they want to take on that visionary role, then a really nice cadence is once a week with that operator to say, okay, right, the operator comes to them. It's like, here are the list of priorities that operator has found. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that visionary can say, oh, you know what, there's this other thing that I've been working on. Like, I've got this new deal. It's number 7. Let's put that at number 1. You know, it's having this regular catch up, but having that ability to hand over the reins is really important. And those people that don't have that weekly sync up and clear vision are the ones that struggle to hand over to and delegate to people that are going to run their business.
I find the same thing. Lately, I've said to people, look, just bring me on for a month if you want. I'm happy to just see what you've got, give you ideas. If you want to do anything past that, great, because I know it's seasonal. But the ones who ask for help, get the full thing, and then want to fight you or don't implement it are kind of confusing in a way. It's like wasting everybody's time.
You want our help.
Then you have to let someone take it over or get involved and be open to being challenged on status quo. And one thing I remind them is, listen, you're here because status quo isn't enough for you. You're not getting the best possible result that would make you happy. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have had a conversation. So be open to change, be open to some new ideas, be open to some discomfort. Through that discomfort comes growth. And I actually remember this moment. It was around about the year 2000 and 2001. And I was offered to go and run a dealership. It was the first time Mercedes-Benz intervened with a dealer with me. They said, listen, we want you to hire this guy, it was me, to go and fix up your dealership. Otherwise, we're not happy for you to have a dealership. And so these people interviewed me and they offered me the job. And it was, at the time, It's a big salary. It was like $200,000 plus 2 company cars, a laptop and a phone, which at that time, I was in my 20s, was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I was sort of hesitating, and the state general manager, he said to me, James, sometimes you have to repot yourself. Like, you're a tree in a pot plant and you'll only grow as big as the pot. If you can smash the pot plant and go into the ground, those roots can go way down deeper and your tree will grow way taller. So this is the way you grow. We've got to get you out of the pot and into the ground. And I'm like, okay, I did it on the proviso to myself. I made a commitment to myself. I'll do it as long as I purchase a property. And boy, whatever pain or challenge I thought it was going to be, which I thought was going to be really, really hard, it was way harder. This 4.5 years later, the guy's trying to kill me with a steak knife. It got wild. And
so many lessons I can imagine.
Well, I'm like, what's your issue? Like, what's going on? And he said, you have too much talent. Everyone loves you. They hate me. This guy was like absolute psychopath, bipolar, manic depressive, cocaine snorting, alcoholic, just the works. And he hated me because everyone loved me and I'd done such a good job. And it really bothered him.
Wow.
To the point he thought it'd be easier just to take me out, waving around
with a steak knife.
Yeah, and I'm like, I really probably need to work somewhere else at this point.
Well, I like your pot plant analogy, putting your roots deeper, sort of makes me think about lifestyle, like what lifestyle is going to be suited towards you if you're selling or versus getting someone to run your operation for you. And I think selling is the obvious cash now option. Great, cash now. What am I going to do with my time now? Am I going to...
Well, that's actually the key point. If you don't know what you're going to do once you sell, you probably shouldn't sell. If you don't have something that you're excited about or interested in, you're going to be very remorseful.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because if you're going to sell, are you going to have enough to retire? Is retirement what you really want? Are you going to spin up a new... Are you going to spin up a new
these
venture?
100-year-old Japanese people, and their secret to living that long was continuing to do some kind of work.
Purpose or something, yeah.
And this will sound weird to anyone who listens to a lot of my stuff. I'm not saying it's pina coladas by the beach. Like, that's not the goal for me. I'm saying more ikigai, not Western ikigai, Venn diagram ikigai, the bullshit one. I mean the real Japanese version of ikigai, like the thing you love that brings you joy. I still want to do meaningful work. I love making my YouTube videos for the surf brand. It interests me. I'm happy to go down and film and create scripts and publish it. And when 41,500 people view it, do you know, Lloyd, every day I get emails or direct messages or comments on the video, people asking me what the right fins for their board are or what shape.
You are the fins guy now.
But I'm not now. I'm doing types of boards. So now they're asking me which board and stuff. So I've gone up a category.
Okay.
So I'm no longer a finfluencer.
Oh, okay. A finfluencer.
More of a boardfluencer. And I'm receiving my free surfboard in the next day or so. It's been shipped up. So like the offers are coming in, which is it's pure. Like, it's not financially going to change my life right at this point, but it's very interesting to me and I enjoy it. And that's my point. My point is, I'm not saying we have to retire or do nothing. I feel like anyone who's at the point where they're going to sell their business is already the visionary type or the creator type who is more than likely going to be doing many things after they sell. But it is helpful to know what that thing is my main point here.
Certainly all of the entrepreneurs I know there doesn't seem to be an end. If they're selling, there's going to be another business. There's another opportunity. And the problem that a lot of people have is that they're just spread quite thinly. And so moving into this investor type role or having someone run it for you gives them that ability to now have multiple income streams, start multiple ventures, do all the things that interest them and not be so bogged down in one thing, or certainly focus on the next thing while they keep the other thing going.
That is the point. You don't have to sell your business to start on the next thing.
if
you have someone operating the business you've got?
One of my first clients taught me an interesting lesson, and this surprised me. He was doing the long hours, 16-hour days, and he was, scattergunning the team with tasks, doing all the project management. And we managed to get him out of that and put rhythms and dashboards and feedback loops in, got him completely out of that level of operation. A great victory. This guy is no longer doing all the hard yards. What did he do? He just went straight into video editing, starts doing long days doing video editing. But the difference was, that was his passion.
That is it. I mean, no doubt there are certain types out there. The Hormosis strike me as being an example of this. They want to work 7 days a week. They tell you to disconnect from family members and anyone else who tells you otherwise. That is totally fine. And I think it is totally fine if that's what you want to do and it excites you and you don't have other responsibilities. Like you don't have kids. Why not? If you love it, go for it. So what am I saying here? Bringing in an operator is leverage. If you want to work 7 days a week and you want to make $100 million a year, then why not bring in operators for all of your businesses and do $1 billion a year, right? Like just leverage it up. Go for it. It's a leverage tool. Doesn't mean you don't have to do any work. It doesn't mean you have to keep your business, because if you did want to sell your business, it certainly makes sense to bring an operator in anyway. In fact, I can't really think of a scenario where you shouldn't have solid operations, can you?
No, you've got to have solid operations, or it's just a sticky tape operation that's going to spin apart.
It's a one-man business, it's a job-like thing.
Well, I've got one more topic which you touched on at the beginning, and that's legacy.
Yeah.
And when I thought about legacy, I thought, when I was a bachelor, stay with me here, James, I tried to teach a girlfriend how to surf, and it wasn't her passion. It was my passion, and I was pushing her into my hobby. It wasn't her unique ability. And looking back, it was a mistake. I put pressure on her to do this thing that I was invested in every day. And I think about that experience, and I don't try and push anyone into learning how to surf who doesn't want to do it. But that's a little bit like your skill in business too. So I think where your passion is where your abilities tend to be. And, for me, I like teams and systems. I like fixing problems, and the people who work with me, they like that too. And so a lot of people think about this in business, like, okay, maybe I'm going to leave my business as my legacy. Am I going to hand it over to someone in my business? Have hand it over to someone in my family. And I don't know if that's always the right thing to do, as in to have that person run your business, to hand over that asset and have that someone in your family run that. Because I've seen this done well, and I've seen it done badly. So it's something I think that really needs a lot of consideration if they're going to go down that road. Like, I can think of, some good examples. Like, I know the owner of the biggest winery in the Southern Hemisphere handed that down to his daughter. Daughter does an amazing job running this operation. That was a fit. Perhaps he saw that skill in her, and this has been really successful. But I don't think that's quite often how it goes, where people bring friends or family in the business to have them run that as that legacy. And I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think when you meet someone, you have someone as a friend or a family, and then you want to have them come into your business. It's not necessarily as good as having someone who you met through business and then having them becoming a friend. Because when you met them through business, you knew what their business skills were. You didn't look at it through a lens of friendship. I don't think you were as biased by it. What do you think about that?
Strong views. Firstly, I've worked in the automotive industry where it's extremely common to have second and third generation people running the business. The last place I worked was a second generation, and it really showed me some of the weaknesses of inheriting a business where you don't necessarily have a particular interest or talent. And at a lot of the dealer conventions, there was entire rooms full of second and third generation operators. And I didn't really respect them that much, because they were just lucky to have inherited a business.
Yeah.
They didn't go through any particular difficulty or challenge, they were the beneficiary of inflation and locking out. There's a big moat in an industry like that. If you don't have a franchise agreement or you don't have land and building, you're not playing the game. That's why online was such a good leveler. Whilst I had amazing parents, I took my own path from, I worked very briefly for my grandfather. He tried to fire me the very first day in the first minute, which is funny. I arrived late. My car wouldn't start. I had to push start it. I was like 3 minutes late. I rocked up and he said, "Piss off, son, you're late."
Brutal.
So, ruthless, yeah. And I said, "No, but seriously, my car battery." He said, "I don't want to hear excuses. Piss off. You're not working for me if you can't come on time." Like, he was a hard taskmaster. I worked for him for a little while as a timber broker in his backyard on the phones, and he taught me how to sell, which is very fortunate. So I was beneficiary of that. My grandma taught me to paint, and she taught me about light and shade, and you can't have good without bad and bad without good. Black wouldn't be black without white, and white wouldn't be white without black. So it was like very valuable lessons and insights. But from a career perspective, when I went off in 1991 as a debt collector, it was as an independent employee in a company there was no particular leg up or handout ever in my whole career. And it's made me who I am now. And I actually wish that for my children. In fact, my oldest son has deliberately not drawn on my network or my knowledge base in his own career, even though his surname is the same as mine and people do sort of start referencing me from time to time. He wanted to create his own path, and I really respect and admire that. All my kids are like that so far because I've seen the damage of nepotism. It's savage. And there's entire TV shows about the media nepotism and stuff, right? We know who they're talking about. So generally it's not great. I absolutely agree with you. It's better to be friends in business first. And then establish a friendship off that. That's not exactly how you and I started, but
True.
We made it through that. But I wouldn't say we weren't deep friends or mates when we started. We had something in common, which already is one filter. If you're talking to someone, the only time you're talking to someone is out 200 meters out the back of a beach on a surfboard, it already eliminates a lot of potential things. I already know that you're resilient, that you respect nature, that you have an appreciation for struggle, that you have your wits about you and acuity to manage the 200 other people out there at the exact same time. And I know geographically we have lots of things in common. And so it's a good filter. But yeah, just being a friend with someone is usually a terrible idea to go into business with someone. And I've said this before, the most common reason people start 50-50 partnerships is because they're scared of doing it by themselves. They're not owning up to the responsibility of doing it 100%. And they're secretly wishing the other person will carry a bit of that load. And automatically you're behind because you have to share in half the income. And almost never is the distribution 50-50 in terms of effort, or even if one person's doing a lot of actual labor and the other person's incredibly smart, there'll always be resentment and disdain creeping in there. So I feel like I've covered that, the friendship part of business thing, and I feel like I've covered you're calling it legacy, but I didn't think of legacy as the same way. I was thinking of legacy, let's say someone who is independent and cut their own path. I think of legacy as what do they leave after they're gone?
So, I mean, in that case, I mean, it's like if you're selling, it can be a one and done thing. Like, that's it, done. And what are you going to hand on? Are you going to hand on like money to your family? And maybe that's it. Do you want to do it? Otherwise, it can be a good.
I think of that as succession.
Okay, yeah, succession.
I think the topic of handing over to your kids is the topic of succession, and I think it's something to be very careful about. And the most successful ones I've seen are where the kid goes and does their own thing and gets their own confidence and their own runs on the board and then comes back to the business. If the kid never left the business, they'll never really know if it was them or just pure luck, and that problem.
And I think if you're going to do something like that, then it's a huge risk to just hand it over. You'd want to have some kind of experienced operator or some guardrails there to just test if this is a good idea. I mean, financially, handing down a business can be a fantastic investment opportunity, a great tool to pass on to your family, but to just give all of that control to an unknown is just incredibly risky.
Well, let's think about big brands where the founder's no longer with us, but they're still big brands like Disney, right? You could say, excuse
me.
You're right.
You're just inhaling tea.
That's right. You could give me an amazing viral clip here, Lloyd. Just I was thinking about legacy like Disney, no longer there, or Colonel Sanders with KFC, something that lives on beyond the founder. That's what I think of legacy. But I want to sort of ponder this. Once they're gone, does it really actually matter to them? Like, seriously, they're just dust. Is it completely pointless to have that as a goal? Is it just ego?
Oh, that's a deep one. I mean, for me, this is a dark thought, but if I was thinking I was in my last years, I would kind of want to tie up my loose ends and make sure things are all done up and handed over.
Yeah, but why? Let's say you're dead, you don't have a will, everything's a mess. Do you care now you're gone? It doesn't actually affect you anymore.
I don't know. My gut feeling is that I just have that pride that I would want that, and I would want that clean.
So it's a self-interested thing.
I can't rationalize it. It's a hard one.
I know you're blessed with the curse of needing everything to be in order. It's like that's what makes you brilliant at your job. You're highly organized. You take the most extreme example, like an Elon Musk. You're just going to do what you do, I think. It's the ultimate thing that I think explains it is like the lion and the gazelle. The lion is going to eat the gazelle because that's what lions do. The gazelle's going to run from the lion because that's what gazelles do. Like, I think you probably know by now what kind of person you are. And unless you're doing something illegal or immoral or not good for humans, which if you are, you should stop it. But if you're just doing you, just do you, like Gary Vee says, and just be okay to sit in that. And like what I'm saying is I don't really feel an obligation to be lining the next generation's pockets. It would probably be harmful to them. And a lot of billionaires have said they're not giving their kids their fortune. They've outright stated it. I'm not giving my kid because they realize it's terrible for them. And secondly, there's a chance that nothing I do will have any major dent in the universe. But I feel like a huge amount of that justification is just ego talking from people. Like, honestly, they're bluffing. They're kind of just puffing themselves up a bit for no real reason.
I think that's, for me, I think it's better to teach someone how to fish than give them the fish. And that's why I like the idea of if you were going to hand down that entity to someone, then teach them how to run it, see if they're good, see if they want to do it. And if they want to do it, then great. Maybe you've got that safety guard there who can now hand over and have them run it.
In your case, VirtualDOO is a way that you can trial what it would be like if you sold, because you don't have the day-to-day responsibilities, but you still haven't sold.
It's true. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is the case where you can act as the investor and take that step, whether you want to get ready. I mean, that's a really good way to sort of round this out. I think if you've got a team and you're not sure whether you want to exit or you don't want to exit, or you're in a day-to-day, then having someone run it for you is an ideal test step to see if that's going to be a good fit for you. Like, is this going to be good for me to stay in the investor role, or do I want to sell it? Either way, it's a good option to be not the person running the day-to-day. It's best for you to be able to hand off the day-to-day operations to someone else.
I like that. And that doesn't have to be the first step. The first step might be to just engage in an audit of some kind just to get a report on the lay of the land, like a gap analysis on where you compare to the benchmark.
Yeah, that's how we always start. We always start with an audit and just see what are the opportunities. Do they have? There's normally a whole load of low-hanging fruit that's just obvious to us as soon as we go in the door. So that's normally how we start.
And from my perspective, my message is live the best life for you, regardless of not being burdened by the next generation as your major consideration, not being burdened by how everyone's going to think about you when you're not here. Focus on the time you are here. That's my message. That's what I help people do. And getting leverage and spending more time on the things you enjoy, even if that's building businesses, can be achieved by people like Lloyd coming in to help out. Lloyd from VirtualDOO.com. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me here, Jane.
We'll put this up in episode 1099. What do you think about this episode? Any highlights or takeaways? Let me know. I do respond to emails. You can get in touch with me or Lloyd easily enough, and we'll catch you on a future episode.
This is James Schramko.